Mr. Speaker, Canada makes everyone a promise. It's a very simple deal. You work hard, you get decent food, and a good home in a safe neighborhood. Doesn't matter where you come from, you work hard, that's what you get. But that promise, like everything else, is broken after 9 years of this NDP Liberal Prime Minister. He's doubled housing costs. That's why I came forward with a now widely celebrated idea to axe the GST sales tax on new homes, saving up to $50,000 on the cost of a new home. Will he accept my common sense plan to axe the tax and build the homes?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the only thing that the Conservative leader is offering at a time where Canadians need support is cuts. He's proposing to cut billions of dollars of investments in housing across the country to increase densification, to cut red tape, to accelerate the construction of homes and apartments that Canadians need. He's offering cuts. He's offering austerity. He's saying everything is broken, and then he's thinking that cuts to services and programs and investments is what's going to help Canadians. That's not responsible leadership, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
He proposes to cut bureaucracy and taxes, Mr. Speaker. Let's axe the sales tax on new homes, saving up to $50,000 on a new home. That's a savings of almost $2,700 per year in lower mortgage payments. By contrast, the Prime Minister offers a multi-billion-dollar housing bureaucracy in Ottawa that his own housing minister admits doesn't build homes. So why won't he listen to his own housing minister and accept my common sense plan to axe the tax and build the homes?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, one of the most fundamental responsibilities of any Canadian Prime Minister is the safety of Canadians. Unfortunately, the Leader of the Opposition has failed at his responsibility to keep his own MPs safe from foreign interference. So I have asked the security services to figure out a way to give some information to the Leader of the Opposition so that he can actually fulfill his responsibility of protecting Canadians, including those within his own caucus. It would be easier if he got a security clearance, but I've asked them to give him some information nonetheless.
And ask the Honourable Member from Selkirk into Eastmain, please, not to take the microphone. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, I know that the Prime Minister has told his caucus he's not sleeping. He's pulling his hair out with stress because of his caucus revolting against him. Now he's spreading tin pot conspiracy theories rather than answering the question. 80% of Canadians now believe that home ownership is only for the very rich after he doubled the cost of housing in 9 years. I came forward with a common sense plan to axe the GST on new homes, saving up to $50,000 on a new home. Why won't he accept my plan to axe the tax and build the home?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
He just put forward a plan to cut billions of dollars of investment in housing across the country. But, Mr. Speaker, in regards to issues of national security, it is extraordinarily difficult to see a leader of the Conservative Party refuse to get the necessary security briefings that would allow him to protect his own MPs and indeed protect our Canadian democracy. So I have asked the security services to figure out a way to share some information, perhaps even some names, with the leader of the Conservative Party so that he can take action and protect his members.
L'honorable député de La Prairie. L'honorable chef de l'opposition.
Mr. Speaker, you think after this Prime Minister doubled housing costs, doubled the debt, doubled gun crime, and now doubled food bank use, that the NDP would be pulling its support? After all, the leader said that the Liberals are too weak, too selfish, too beholden to corporate interests to fight for people, and yet there he is, still in power. He doesn't even have the confidence of his own Liberal MPs, but he seems to still have the confidence of the sellout NDP leader. So, will the costly carbon tax coalition stand up in front of Canadians and let people vote in a carbon tax election for change in the future.
I ask members to be very judicious in their choice of words regarding specific members. The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, watchers of Canadian politics will remember that last year the Conservative Party got up pretty much every time they could to talk about national security, to talk about it in a partisan way, but to talk about it every chance they could get. And now that we have offered the Leader of the Opposition a security clearance so that he can be fully informed on national security, all that they've been able to say is political attacks and asking questions of other parties. Why has the Leader of the Opposition chosen to not get a security clearance when the safety of his own MPs is in the balance?
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, it looks like the Prime Minister is worried about his personal political security as his MPs are revolting and trying to push him out of the job. And so he's desperately trying to change the channel on the questions that I've asked. Now, Mr. Speaker, I think that's unfair, though. Those MPs helped this Prime Minister double housing costs, double the debt, double gun crime, double food bank use. Why won't he turn around and look them in the eye and say they should stand up for their own record and his, face the music in a carbon tax election?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, no responsibility by the government is more important than keeping Canadians safe. That's why our security services every single day take actions and work hard to keep Canadians safe. So it is inexplicable to our security services that they cannot let the Leader of the Conservative Party know about the threats facing him, his party, and our democracy because he refuses to get a security clearance. So I have asked those security agencies to look at ways to share at least some information with him and perhaps some names so that he can protect his
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, if he wants to release the names, he legally can do it now on the floor of the House of Commons. He can do it.
Order. The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Okay, Mr. Speaker, now we're getting something. He's actually engaging on the issue of national security. Unfortunately, he is willing to put at risk the agents, the officers, the sources that are putting their lives at risk to keep Canadians safe. There is a reason we do not disclose classified information in places where our adversaries are watching and paying attention. But we can release many names to him and much information to him if he only gets his security clearance. So he will be able to keep his own team members safe from foreign interference, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
He won't release the names because he knows that he and his party are compromised. And he won't answer my question because right now, 24 of his MPs are rebelling against him. They're asking for a secret ballot to fire him, Mr. Speaker. But, Mr. Speaker, as I say, that is not fair. Every one of those MPs helped this Prime Minister create 1,400 homeless encampments in Ontario. Every one of them voted to quadruple the carbon tax. They can't just throw him out. He can't just run away. They need to face the music. Why won't we have a carbon tax election now?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
For well over a year in this House, just about every question from the Leader of the Opposition was about national security, was about foreign interference. And we called a commission of inquiry. We've offered security clearances to all leaders. And indeed, the leader of the Green Party, the NDP, and the Bloc have all done the responsible thing and gotten their security clearances and gotten top-secret briefings from our security services. The leader of the Conservative Party chooses to play the pettiest form of politics instead of stepping up on his responsibilities as leader, protecting Canadians, protecting his MPs, protecting our institutions.
L'honorable chef de l'opposition.
West End Builders Association stated that my common sense Conservative plan to axe the sales tax on new homes under $1 million is, and I quote, the most significant housing announcement made in the past 2 decades. Removing the GST shows leadership to cut crippling levels of taxation on new housing, puts money directly back in the pockets of Canadians while combating the housing crisis. Why won't the Prime Minister listen to the people who build homes so that we can reverse the crisis he caused? Why don't we axe the sales tax on new homes today?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
You know what shows leadership, Mr. Speaker? Taking seriously the safety of Canadians. Exactly. Mr. Speaker, the RCMP has concluded that the government of India was involved in the killing of a Canadian on Canadian soil, in extortion, in violence, in drive-by shootings, in home invasions, and the leader of the Conservative Party of Canada refuses to get his security clearance so that he can keep Canadians safe, can even keep his fellow MPs safe. That's why I've asked our security services to find a way to share some information with him so maybe he can do at least a part of his job.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
We'd like to see him do any of his job after 9 years, Mr. Speaker, like reversing the housing price increase he caused. Let me quote British Columbia's Victoria Residential Builders Association said, quote, reducing government costs, including GST, would have a significant impact on housing affordability. The Conservative leader's suggestion is welcome news and long overdue if the federal government wants to get serious about housing affordability for Canadians. This common sense plan will stimulate 30,000 new extra homes built every year. So will he accept my common sense plan to axe the tax and build the homes?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Conservatives, you always need to look at the fine print underneath the easy slogans. And the fine print on this one is cutting billions of dollars of investments in housing right across the country at a time where we need to be building more housing more quickly. Cuts are not the solution. But if he wants to take something seriously, perhaps he should take seriously the issue of national security, because he refuses, for inexplicable, political, childish, who knows what reasons, refuses to get his security clearance that will allow him to keep his own MPs safe, to keep Canadians safe, to keep our democracy and its institutions safe.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
After 9 years after promising he'd get rid of chronic homelessness, it's actually risen by 38%. Now there are 1,400 homeless encampments in Ontario. It's almost as bad as it is in NDP-governed British Columbia. But there is good news. The Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness heard about my common sense plan to axe the GST on housing, and their founder said, this is smart. Mr. Speaker, those who are fighting to end homelessness, like my solution of axing the sales tax on new homes, will he accept my plan to axe the tax and build the homes?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, like I said, if he wants to be helpful on the issue against homeless, maybe he could give a call to his fellow Conservatives, the premiers of Saskatchewan and Ontario, to agree to accept the money we're putting on the table that they could match to support people living in encampments and fight homelessness effectively on the ground. But he won't do that. And what else he won't do is get his security clearance so that he can actually protect his fellow MPs, protect Canadians in this democracy. He refuses to get the security clearance necessary to keep Canadians safe. That's not the kind of leadership Canadians have.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister says that he opposes taking the GST off of new homes. He wants to keep the taxes high and keep housing prices rising. His solution is to fund more bureaucracy. And what has that done? Well, that's doubled housing costs. It's caused a 39% increase in homelessness rates. So I've got an idea. Why don't we let Canadians decide? If he won't have a carbon tax election, why don't we have a housing tax election and allow Canadians to decide on more bureaucracy through him or axing the sales tax through me?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians watching today will see that the Leader of the Opposition is refusing to stand up and take a strong position in protecting women's rights unequivocally in this House. He can't because his MPs won't let him. At the same time, Mr. Speaker, he's refusing to protect his MPs by not getting the security clearance necessary to get fully informed on threats to our democracy from foreign powers. Why won't he get the security clearance necessary to take international interference seriously?
That's right.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, his tinfoil hat conspiracy theories and misinformation will not distract. We stand up for women's rights every day on this side. It has been our 20-year-long policy in the Conservative Party that there will be no restrictions on women's reproductive choices or on abortion. He knows that, but he doesn't want to discuss the issues that we do disagree on, which are this. Housing costs have doubled under him. His solution is to spend billions more on bureaucracy that drives them up further. We want to help women and men own a home, so will he vote for a housing tax election?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I'd be interested to see him do a very simple thing in his next answer. Switch the order of the statements he just made. Anytime he talks about unequivocally standing up for women's rights in this House, crickets from the Conservative backbench. That is because consistently members of the Conservative Party of Canada move forward measures that restrict and restrain women's rights, that limit women's rights to full suite of reproductive services. The Conservative Party members do not stand up for women's rights, so nor does the...
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, speaking of women's rights, just yesterday, his former parliamentary secretary came out publicly, Selina Cesar-Chavannes, and said that she was abused, intimidated, and mistreated by this Prime Minister, that he used her for his fake feminist agenda, and that he treated her like garbage, Mr. Speaker. It is terrible the way he exercises hypocrisy. Housing hypocrisy by doubling costs, tax hypocrisy by raising people's prices while flying around the world. How about putting an end to the hypocrisy and calling a carbon tax election?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
What is fascinating, Mr. Speaker, is the spectacle of watching
J'ai juste demandé à l'honorable député de ne pas prendre la parole quand il n'est pas reconnu par la présidence. J'insiste là-dessus. Le très honorable Premier ministre du début, s'il vous plaît.
Mr. Speaker, it is fascinating to see the lengths to which the Conservative leader will go to avoid the issue of national security, to avoid the issue of safety of Canadians, to avoid talking about issues of foreign interference, because he cannot answer why he refuses to take the security clearance that would allow him to access top secret information focused on keeping his members safe, keeping our democracy safe. We know that foreign governments interfered in the last leadership campaigns in the Conservative Party. He wants nothing to do.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Speaker, Prime Minister is coming unglued. He's flailing around, spreading conspiracy theories and demonstrable disinformation in order to distract from the fact that not only did he double housing costs, double gun crime, and double food bank use, but now 24 of his own MPs want to fire him. We can't go on like this with a Prime Minister who admits he can't even sleep at night because he is so in knots. Will he let his 24 dissident MPs vote freely on a non-confidence motion so we can have a carbon tax election?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I'm confused about what happened. The Conservative Party used to be out defense of Canada, but they dropped the defense spending to below 1% last time they were in office. They're supposed to be about law and order, but they stand against stronger measures on gun control. And they're supposed to be about national security, and the leader of the Conservative Party refuses to get the necessary security briefings to keep our democracy safe and to distinguish from the conspiracy theories that float around what is fact and what is fiction. Why won't he trust our national security agencies?
L'honorable chef de l'opposition.
After 9 years of releasing violent gun criminals and leaving our borders open to smugglers, this Prime Minister has presided over a 116% increase in gun violence. And yet he was out boasting about it on Twitter. The Toronto Police Union, the largest police union in Canada, said his words were out of touch. They were offensive to victims and brave officers. So, given that his approach has doubled gun crime, why won't he accept our common sense plan to lock up the gun criminals, scan the cans, and stop the crime?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, when the Conservative Party's plan on guns is to unfreeze the market on handguns and legalize assault-style weapons across this country, nobody can take them seriously on the issue of guns. But they are talking about national security now and safety, which begs the question, why will the leader of the Conservative Party not get the necessary security briefings, clearance, to get the necessary security briefings to show Canadians that he's capable of taking national security seriously?
I ask the members to not carry on loud conversations, in particular the Honourable Member from Waterloo across the highway, while she is not being recognized. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Unfreeze. Mr. Speaker, it has never been easier for a criminal to get a handgun, in addition to which that he's allowed it to be legal today to own a handgun. He has brought in an amnesty on his own gun ban, re-legalizing all the guns that he said he was going to ban. And 4 years after he held that big press conference with a scary-looking black gun on the front of his podium, a made-in-Hollywood-style cartoon, gun crime is actually up dramatically. So why doesn't he actually ban the criminals, secure the borders, and stop the crime?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, slogans furnished to him by the gun lobby don't keep Canadians safe. Canadians know that significant common sense gun control measures, which we have put forward, are what is making a difference in keeping Canadians safe, and we will continue to do that. But we are now at least talking about security issues, so Canadians may be wondering, why is it that the leader of the Conservative Party continues to refuse to get the appropriate clearances from our national security agencies so he can take the issue of foreign interference, including against his own party, seriously?
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
After 9 years, 9 million Canadians live in food insecurity, according to Food Banks Canada. 9 million, that's 23% of our population. 23%, twice as high as the rate in the United States. Food prices have risen 36% faster in Canada than in the States, and that gap has happened at the same time as the implementation of the carbon tax and all the government greed. Now he wants to quadruple the carbon tax and starve even more people. Why not have a carbon tax election so Canadians can vote to axe the tax?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the Canada Carbon Rebate puts more money back in the pockets of the middle class and people working hard to join it. The Parliamentary Budget Officer recognized that 8 out of 10 Canadians are better off with the Canada Carbon Rebate than the price on pollution costs them in their jurisdictions. So the Leader of the Opposition is proposing to take away money from vulnerable families across this country at a time they need it. What the Leader of the Opposition is also doing is refusing to get the security clearance necessary to keep Canadians safe by getting the briefings from our security agencies that talk about foreign interference.
That's right.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, if the carbon tax made people better off, we wouldn't see a doubling of food bank use under this Prime Minister. You can't blame the rest of the world. Food prices have risen 36% faster in Canada than in the United States of America in the same time period. And that gap grew as the carbon tax came in year after year over the last half decade. It turns out if you tax the farmers who make the food, the truckers who ship the food, the grocers who sell the food, you tax all who buy the food. So if he really wants to quadruple that tax, why not have a carbon tax election so Canadians can decide?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
The Canada Carbon Rebate puts more money in the pockets of 8 out of 10 Canadians right across the country, and it's top economists, scientists, and the Parliamentary Budget Officer who've declared that. At the same time, Mr. Speaker, we know the Leader of the Opposition won't listen to experts. He won't even listen to our national security experts who are trying to let him know about threats to his own MPs. I have asked them to figure out a way to share at least some information with him, despite the fact that he has refused to get a security clearance, because the responsibility of Prime Minister is to protect all Canadians, including, apparently, Conservative MPs.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, more division to distract. You know, here we have 2 million people lining up at food banks. 1/4 of Canadians live in food insecurity, a level twice as high as in the United States. Food prices rising 36% faster in Canada than in the U.S., coinciding with the carbon tax coming into force. Now he wants to quadruple it. 56% of food banks say they're literally rationing food rationing in a first world country, Mr. Speaker. Before he starves more people, why can't we have a carbon tax election and axe the tax?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, if he actually cared about food insecurity, instead of just wanting to politicize and instrumentalize it, he would have supported our national school food program.
Right.
But he does not. What he also will not do is take seriously his responsibility as a party leader in this House, as someone who desperately wants to become Prime Minister, to actually get the security clearance and therefore the briefings necessary to protect our democracy, our institutions, and his team members from the threats of foreign interference. That, Mr. Speaker, is absolutely irresponsible.
That's right.
The honourable member from Spadina, Fort York.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister wants to talk about national security. Let's do it. On New Year's Eve, Canadians will be ushering in the Hogue Commission's final report on foreign interference. But meanwhile, media continue to provide insight as to who are the infamous 11 parliamentarians in the pocket of China. Mr. Speaker, does the Prime Minister have trouble sitting at the cabinet table when he must wittingly know that at least one of his ministers is not working in the service of Canada? Or is he entirely witless?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, that was an absolutely disgraceful display of irreverence and unseriousness in a place that deserves a serious contemplation of issues of national security. But it doesn't surprise me he's choosing to sit with the Conservative Party of Canada because their leader won't even get the necessary clearance to get the necessary briefing to keep Canadians